8 or 10, something like that. And my father supported them the rest of their lives, and they both lived to be about in their early 70s. My mother's parents, whom I barely knew, because I was a very small child when they moved from Omaha to Israel. At that time it was Palestine. And they moved there, and I saw pictures of the house they moved into, and they both died in Palestine and are buried there. And
What was a typical day like, or a typical meal like at the Lipsey household?
well, my father, like Shirley's mother, my mother was a wonderful cook, and we all ate at the same time. We all had dinner together, and we all had dinner around the dinner table, and it was my father and mother and my sisters and their husbands and everybody else. All of us came to dinner, and it was a wonderful life. We were a close knit family. My youngest sister and I, Millie, I was a kind of an irascible little kid, and I caused her a lot of problems, but she was always good to me.
Shirley, I'm dying to hear how the 11 children and your parents sat down to meals.
Well, I'll tell you, that's an interesting question. As I said, we lived in a big house, and I was considered the younger half of the head of the younger half of the family. So we used to eat early, and we would eat in the kitchen. And then we had a lovely breakfast room off of the pantry. And that's where the others ate later, when Daddy would get home from work.
Tell me about your brothers.
Well, I'll tell you something. I must have been, and I was a terrible tomboy. And it really irritated me very early on that I was a girl, because I hated wearing dresses, and I loved being in overalls. And I couldn't do a lot of the things my brothers could do. I mean, they were really, Mother was really much easier on them as far as what they could do and what we girls couldn't do. And I can understand that. I could understand it as I got older. But it was just that I really resented being a girl. And so did my younger sister, Glory. But we certainly outgrew that. And
Thank goodness.
yeah. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and we was like an apartment over the garage. And during the summers, my sisters and I, my younger sisters and I, would play house, and we'd clean up the place there, and then we had two little brothers, so we would treat them as our children. And the boys really didn't care for that, because we were bothering them and ordering them around and all that. I mean, you can imagine growing up in a big family like that. And another thing, there were two stairways going in the house. And the one stairway went all the way up to the third floor. And a lot of times, Mother didn't know that my older brothers had brought home friends who stayed overnight. And there would be these boys coming down with our boys, and their mother would be making pancakes or whatever. But she was just always so gracious and so sweet, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. We all had such respect for her.
What are your memories of growing up and going to Central High School?
Well, it was interesting then, too, because I went into high school when it was 1940. And, of course, the whole time that I was growing up in my childhood, things were happening in Europe because Hitler was coming to power, and Mother still had family over there. And so I was and also the neighborhood we lived in, there were some very anti-Semitic neighbors. And so we were really very much aware of being Jewish. And also the grade school we went to, there were maybe 4 or 5 Jewish families. In fact, Eddie Zarinsky went to Saunders. And he was the same age as I think my sister Glory, who was just younger than I. And the friends that I had when I was in grade school, when we got to Central, I mean, there was just such a sharp division there. And we just didn't have any more non-Jewish friends. We more or less had mostly Jewish friends. And I was in a sorority, a Jewish sorority in high school, which thank goodness all those high school sororities have been banned. But it was a heartbreak for a lot of the Jewish girls who didn't get in. And it was terrible. And anyway, I had wonderful friends. It was a great time to be young, and Omaha was always a wonderful place to live.
Who were some of your friends in high school?
Well, Ruthie Kulikovsky and Marion Livingston. Her father was the one who started the Corinne and Milton Livingston Foundation, and they were wonderful people. And let's see, Franny Blumkin, Franny Vietzer, and, oh goodness, Phyllis Studna, whose mother I think had been a Milder. And then there were 2 girls who came to Central when I was a sophomore, and they were both from Germany, and one had been sponsored by one of the Nogs, I can't remember which one, and the other one had been sponsored by Jules Newman. Wasn't it Jules Newman?
I think so.
He had a grocery store.
No, Jewel.
Well, no, Harriet Newman's folks.
Oh, no,
Sadie Newman.
Yeah,
Sadie, and what was her father's name?
I don't remember his name.
Yeah.
She did all the talking. I don't
Yeah.
remember his name.
They lived off of, south of Leavenworth, around Woolworth, I
Yeah, their
think.
daughter was Harriet.
Yeah, a beautiful girl. Anyway.
One of my many early loves.
Yeah. But anyway, listening to these 2 girls' stories, it was just heartbreaking. They had lost their families.
Was that Lori?
Lori Boasberg. She married Leonard Boasberg, and they owned the live wire cleaners. And,
Yeah, Leonard's father owned live wire cleaners,
Yeah.
and Leonard used to work there.
and he hated it.
Reluctantly.
Yeah, because he wanted to be a writer. And he eventually became the editorial page editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yeah, he worked in Omaha. He worked for the Sun newspapers.
Yeah, he'd write a column.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy. We still keep in touch with them. And Lottie ended up marrying Jack.
Lottie Rosenberg.
Yeah. And she ended up marrying Jack, I can't remember his name. Reutstein. Was it Reutstein?
I don't remember.
His sister was married to her, Dr. Reutstein. And anyway, they moved to San Francisco. But it was just a great group of friends.
Shirley, we've got to get even with Jimmy now. He mentioned one of his loves in high school. Now you tell me about yours.
Well, I had a secret crush on Nicky Newman. He was a year ahead of me. And when I was 16, we had a party at our house. And I asked him, and I was very shy, but Nicky was such a neat guy. He was from the Hinky Dinky Newmans. And in fact, he's Murray Newman. He was Murray Newman's oldest brother and Bob Newman's. And they were a great family, or are a great family. But anyway, it was Nicky. So we were at a party at his house many years later, and he married Racky, I forget what, Hiller. She was from Chicago. And we were at a party at their house one night before they moved away. And we were sitting talking, and I said to him, "You know, Nicky, I had such a crush on you in high school." And he said, "Why didn't you ever tell me?"
Well, we did get even with Jimmy, though, in this conversation. Jimmy, tell me about your high school days.
Well, my high school days were wonderful. I enjoyed high school, but it was like Shirley said, it was a revelation to me, because in grade school I went to Henry Yates grade school, and there were only a few Jewish kids at Yates. Dorothy Rikus was in. We started kindergarten together, and Buddy Goldstein and I started kindergarten together.
As a matter of fact, you and Betty are only a few days apart.
Yeah, our ages, our birthdays are only a few days apart. But there were only a few of us, and there was no discrimination. There was no problem at all in grade school. And when we went to Central, although I enjoyed my 4 years at Central very much, it was really a revelation, because I had in grade school, my best friend was Jim Clapper, and he lived near us, and we were together all the time. We were inseparable, and we went to high school and we lockered together. We shared a locker at Central, and I would see him at the locker, and other than that, we never saw each other. We were still friends, but not close friends, because he went his way and I went my way. He joined a fraternity, I guess it was called Leabu or something like that, and I joined Rono, and but that wasn't the determining thing. We just went our own ways, and we were still friends, and we continued to be friends until he moved away and I lost track of him. But we didn't. There was a 5 o'clock curtain. Our social lives didn't intertwine at all, and this extended to other people. And at that time, it was very, very unusual for Jewish boys to date non-Jewish girls. It happened occasionally, but nowhere like it is today.
It was when our kids went to Central and West Side.
Yeah, but Central was a wonderful school, and I credit Central with helping me to whatever success I've had.
Did you go on to the university?
Yes, I went on to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and I joined ZBT fraternity, and associated with a wonderful group of guys. And I started out in pre-med, and then I decided I really didn't want to be a doctor, in spite of my mother's protestations. And because she would have liked to have had a son who's a doctor, as every Jewish mother would at that time. And I changed to an economics major. And then when in my senior year, I was editor of and people have a hard time understanding that at this time, and people that know me now, but at that time I became editor of the campus humor magazine, the Ogwan, and I was the editor in my senior year, except that in December of 1941, as some of you may have remembered or have read, there was an event called Pearl Harbor, and that changed all our lives. And so 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor, I quit school just before the end of the first semester of my senior year, and enlisted in in the Army, in the Air Corps, the Army, U.S. Army Air Corps at that time, as a private, and that began a whole new chapter in my life.
We're going to get back to that, but Shirley, did you go on to college?
Oh, yes.
Where did you go?
I went to UCLA, and then I got very homesick, and I went back and I went to the University of Omaha at the time. And in my junior year, I met Jimmy, and as nice Jewish girls did at that time, we got married. And that's where I've been ever since. And we have three great kids.
Were you both in college when you met?
No.
Did you know each other?
Well, he was.
No, I had gotten out of the Army. This was in I knew Shirley's older siblings, her older brothers and sisters. Sister, in long before. All three of her, Irving, Norman,
Harry.
and Harry were all at Central High School when I was there.
And Sissy.
And Sissy Helen, her older sister Sissy, she and I were in the same class at Central, but I had never met Shirley.
I was a child.
Yes, and this is quite a story of how we met. When I came back from the service from overseas, and after I'd been in business for a while in Omaha, the ZBT fraternity in Lincoln was having a fraternity party, and I got an invitation to come, and I had a date with a girl.
From Des Moines.
Yeah, from Des Moines. She was working as a teacher, I think, in Council Bluffs. And she called that day and said she couldn't come to the party because her mother was ill and she had to go to Des Moines to be with her mother. So I wasn't going to go, and my mother said, "Go, maybe you'll meet somebody." So I drove down to Lincoln, and I was enjoying myself at the party, and I spied a girl dancing on the floor with a good friend of mine, Bucky Greenberg. And Bucky and I had been friends for forever. And so I cut in and I danced with it was Shirley, and I danced with Shirley, and I met her, and there began a lasting friendship. And as luck would have it, Bucky was a pledge at the fraternity because he had transferred from
Ames,
Iowa, from the University,
Iowa State.
Iowa State at Ames. And so he was a pledge, and he came over to me and he said, "Would you mind driving my date back to Omaha, because I have to stay down here and clean up the house, help clean up the fraternity house."
And I didn't want to stay.
So I readily acceded to his request, and Shirley and I drove back to Omaha. By the time we got back to Omaha, it was a done deal.